I used to be a missionary in East Asia. I have heard many strange supernatural stories from missionaries, especially those in particularly dark and unreached places. The country I was in was very spiritually dark. While I was in East Asia, I started having demonic attacks at night. At times, demons would visit me and give me violent nightmares that were different from normal nightmares. They were much clearer than a normal nightmare and more terrifying. At other times, I would be awake at night and I would see the demons as if through a veil, dark, shadowy figures. I would always freeze with fear. They evoked a guttural, ancient terror that made me want to hide. I was so terrified that I couldn't speak, but I would somehow eventually muster up the courage to cast them out in the name of Jesus, my heart pounding. Every time it was so difficult to find the courage to speak aloud to them. They would always leave after I casted them out. Not always immediately, sometimes it took a few tries, but they couldn't stand against Christ's power. It has been 9 years since I was in East Asia, and I hadn't had a demonic attack since, until some difficult things happened in my life which caused me to draw nearer to the Lord. During this time, I was convicted to pray for the salvation of a couple of people I knew, who claimed to follow Christ but didn't exhibit any love for him. One night, after praying for the salvation of those people I knew, the demons came again. Later, I realized it was because they were trying to intimidate me so that I wouldn't pray for the salvation of these people. I was awake, and I still saw them as if through a veil. But this time, they were not shadowy figures, and I could make them out more clearly. This was much worse than when they were just shadowy figures. They were horrifying, and I remember one in particular looking at me with its bright yellow eyes from the end of my bed. Its movements were like the quick movements that birds and lizards make. Something about that was particularly horrifying. Again, I was met with that familiar guttural terror, and it made my tongue feel like lead in my mouth. But eventually, I gathered up the courage to cast them out in the name of Jesus, and they left. I was scared at night for the next few weeks. I dreaded the thought of getting ready for bed and going to sleep. So I had to pray for God's protection, and I asked other believers to pray for me as well. It's ironic that the demons' fear tactics actually caused me to pray and rely on the Lord more. I know that God protected me and shielded me from them during that season because they didn't come back. And, thankfully, they haven't come back since. All of this is to say that, in my experience, the demons attacked me when I was being obedient to Christ and striving to make an impact for His kingdom. They don't want the gospel to go forth. They don't want unbelievers to be saved. They hate us. So they will attempt to mess with us to make us fearful and slow us down. But, ultimately, they can't stand against the power of the risen Christ.